Welcome, welcome everyone to the next edition of the Stand Course podcast. Today I have the amazing Jesse Puddles, and he's the Chief Executive Officer of SpotCorp, where he leads with creativity, compassion, and a deep belief in the power of storytelling to transform workplace culture. And since 2021, he's been growing this company through bold facilitation, theatrical innovation, and an unforgettable experience that helps teams lead louder and connect deeper. Welcome, Jesse, to the Stand Course podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Wow, I sound very cool. I'm just saying.
Well, you are very cool. I mean,
Thank
otherwise you wouldn't be here,
That's
Jesse.
fair.
You wouldn't be here if you weren't so cool. So, okay, before we get started, I ask all of my guests, what is your favorite food?
So this is a hard question because normally I don't like to pick favorites, but I will say in general, Mexican food kind of always goes off for me. And I like picking a favorite child between a quesadilla and a burrito is like a hard thing. But
Mm.
I will say, I was never a rice and beans guy, so I used to get burritos without rice or beans. I know I'm a monster. I accept that about myself. But recently I've been embracing beans into my heart. And so
Sorry, I've been embracing being okay, okay.
because of that, I'm gonna say burrito because it's got those beans.
So, Jesse, you've been doing some amazing things. Where do you want to start this conversation today?
Um, that's a great question. I think probably the best place to start the conversation would be to ask you, what do you think is the most important thing for your audience when it comes to team building, leadership development, and those kinds of things? What do they care about?
You know what, Jesse? Thank you for asking that question. I think right now the big thing that I'm talking about is people being interesting and not boring. I'm
Well,
seriously talking about that every day. How can you be more interesting than boring because of this? You see this thing right here? This phone takes so much of our attention and we're on it all the time. So if you are speaking or you're doing any sort of experiences in corporations or whatever, you have to be more interesting than your phone.
I think that you hit the nail on the head with that. And I think that one of the things that makes us so interesting as a company is that we are entirely novel. You know, team building has been around probably since the dawn of time. I don't know. But I think really it saw a resurgence in 2012 with this program called Project Aristotle, where they realized why team building is so valuable. And it's because the teams with the most success aren't the ones with the highest performers. They're the ones with what's called psychological safety,
Mm.
which means that people feel comfortable sharing openly about themselves authentically. They feel comfortable taking risks and they feel like they're in an environment where they can potentially make mistakes and grow from those and not be afraid of those. And so I would say, in a large part, that is the dragon that a lot of team building companies have been trying to chase. How can we create those things where people are working together, where they're feeling more comfortable with each other? But in terms of your question of how do you stay interesting, so many people have become hip to what team building is doing. So, like for instance, and it's also by generation, right? So, for instance, your older generation, your baby boomers and your Gen Xers, they probably are going to be looking for a program that is more this is the facts, this is what we're learning. How can I actually use this tangibly in my work? And so you run an escape room for them and they're pulling out the phone. They're like, why do I care? Um, Meanwhile, you've got your millennials who, we were brought up in a time of we didn't really know how to make friends post college. And so companies were the ways that we were building our social networks. And
Um,
so things like escape rooms and bar nights and things like that really rose to prominence with us because we wanted to build our community in at work and then bring it outward. Um, but The older generation doesn't totally vibe with that, and the younger generation doesn't totally vibe with that. And the reason is that the younger generation cares so much, Gen Z, they care so much about being valued for their ideas, being cared for their perspectives and the ways that they think and what comes up for them and they could care less about an escape room. They've got their community online or even on their phone. They don't need that. What they're looking for is to really feel like what they're doing is making a difference.
Hmm. You know,
So,
I often wonder how that happened, and I think I have a theory.
oh, interesting. Do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, my theory is that, well, it's my generation that's raising those kids, right? That are coming. It's me. So I was the one that was raising those kids in theory, right? So it's the Gen Xers that are raising those kids. And for us, what we saw was our parents grinding to just survive. And then they gave us the opportunity to maybe go to college, but do something practical, right? And a lot of us doing the practical thing, the Gen Xers, what we sort of ended up doing was giving up our sense of purpose because we had to make a paycheck and we wanted to do what was right because we wanted to honor our parents. So now we raise these kids coming up to say, listen, the most important thing is that you follow your purpose and you do what you love. It's our fault. It's our fault that these kids are the way they are because of the way we were. And we didn't want them to experience what we had to do. And that is grind through corporate America and rise through the ranks of leadership, doing something we didn't like. And so, second to that, they watched us suffer. So, my daughter came to me at some point and said, listen, mom, I'm not doing what you do. You're miserable. Why would I want to do what you do? I'm not going to do what you do. I'm going to do something so different than what you do. So that's how we got these people, the new generation.
Yeah, no, and right, and that's the thing is you hit the nail on the head, and there is an aspect of like when you started a company, you do often still have to start at the front and at the beginning of the company as a frontline worker or right above that, if you're post college. Um, but how can you still make those people care about their jobs as they're following their passions, as they're being driven? And I believe that the root of all of that is in our stories. Stories are what bring us together. If you're at a party and you're standing in a circle with a bunch of people that you don't know, and then some guy tells a story about a place you've been or a thing you've experienced, or all of a sudden you're like, you know what? I actually want to get to know you better. I want to know more about you. And when we're in these like work and these pressure cookers and these things, especially, with different generations and different like levels of leadership, it's so easy to just be like, oh, they don't understand me. Or nobody gets what I'm going through. And when you hear someone's story, you actually realize how aligned you are, how similar you are, how similar your motivation drivers are. It's just that your upbringing is different or your way of expressing it is different. So we create environments that bring you all to the same place, that bring you all to the same level. We're fun, so we hit your millennials because you're playing and rapping and being creative. We pair all our content with research. So your
Right.
Gen Xers and your baby boomers are like, oh, why did I just like play with sock puppets? And we go, okay, well, actually, what it did was it lowered your cortisol levels, which actually leads to more productivity in these three verticals. And they go, oh, okay, I get it now. And then your Gen Zs are getting to openly express themselves. They're getting to share their thoughts and ideas. They're getting to be seen, heard, and valued for what makes them special and unique.
Yeah.
I think that is what makes us not boring.
Yeah. And I think that what's interesting about what you said is that stories fill the gap, the age gap. So stories make everything relevant because that story can be applied through all the generations. I talk a lot about people getting very real and authentic with people, sharing that, either if you're a CEO, sharing your founder story, just kind of sharing your why story. Like, why are you here? Why are you doing what you do? Is certainly a story that can be very powerful and moving. Of course, You can tell the logical story of why you're there. Oh, I need to make money. I had done this my whole life. I mean, those are very superficial stories. But if you tell the real story, there's a real story somewhere here.
Yeah.
And if we share the real story, what we're doing is we're creating an atmosphere for a couple of things to happen. Number one, people are able to connect to that story and like you in a different way, that you get rid of all of those like ego things. They move out of the way and they see you for actually who you are, your struggle story. And so I believe we're all made up of strength and struggle. And so when you can show a little more of the struggle, you can connect on deeper levels.
100%. And this is something, and I always talk about this with my team, is that even if there is superficial struggles and disagreements and things, when at the root of the relationship, you know that there is mutual respect and care for each other, you can wade through the other stuff on top and the challenges because you know that at the core of what you have is mutual respect and value in each other.
Mm,
And that is what comes from really understanding someone's story of
yeah,
saying, okay, now I see you, I really see you. And now it's not you and me against each other. It's me and you who value each other against this problem that's standing in our way. And that
exactly.
completely changes the paradigm.
I mean, and it's so critical because for some reason there's like this competition thing that goes on in the workplace. And it's real. It is so real. And there's a lot of ego and there's a lot of people that just are not connecting. But I could imagine, like, you probably have the numbers, like, how much more productive financially are companies that have these high performing teams?
34%.
34%.
Yes. And that also bleeds into retention, which teams that don't have these high performance and this engagement tend to lose people pretty consistently. And every single time you have to replace an employee, that is one third of that employee's salary. So you're already losing 34% on productivity alone. And then every time you lose someone, you're losing an additional one third of that person's salary.
Wow. That's deep. That's a lot of money. And
It's
that's
a
a lot of
lot of money.
it's a lot of money and it's exhausting. It's exhausting to lose people
Yeah.
because who wants to do it all over again? You hire someone, you go through all this effort, not only the money, the effort, and then the actual heart part of it that you're just churning people over and over again. And it's all because people don't feel connected to what you're doing. They don't believe in your mission. Their personal purpose doesn't connect to what you're doing. There's so much to this. And now, if the younger generations are really truly into this connecting their purpose and the why, we really need to make that a bigger part of the story.
It's so huge. There's a study by Gallup that basically looks at different factors that keep employees engaged and ultimately staying. One of those factors is that if you have a best friend at your company, if you feel
Wow.
like you have a best friend. The second one is if you feel like someone at your company actually values your growth. And the third is you actually are being acknowledged for the work that you're doing. That all
Mhm.
speaks to that Gen Z need, but turns out it's an across the board need. It's just at
Yeah.
the older generations we haven't talked about it as much. But
Yeah.
it's still the reason why your people are leaving or disengaged. But you have that added layer of getting them down to their authentic self to admit those things to you.
Yeah. Yeah. This is great. And I have this story, right? When I was in my corporate job, I was very much an innovator, and that wasn't always appreciated. And I was always very purpose driven, and that wasn't always appreciated in the work cultures that I had. Remember, I'm a little bit older than millennial, right? I'm Gen X. And so in the Gen X generation, you know, I was sort of always a little before my time. And so I started talking about purpose probably around 2009. And I got like my hand slapped actually in one of my sessions because we were running a subject matter expert like facilitator session and they said, "Oh, go ahead, teach whatever you like." and I taught about purpose. And I was brought into my director's office and she's like, "Why are you talking about that? Like we don't talk about that here." And it just kind of like hit me like, "Oh my God. Either I'm like not in the right place or these people are just not ready for this conversation." But they became ready after COVID. I think that maybe that was also part of the story, right? Is because after COVID, people understood how fragile life was. And now it's like, okay, if potentially I'm not going to live as long as I might think I'm living, I need to be purposeful.
Yeah. No, I think it's so wholeheartedly true. And I think also COVID gave people, besides, a lot of challenges and heartbreaking things, COVID gave people an opportunity to slow down,
Mm,
to really sit with the life that they have chosen for themselves, the partners they had chosen for themselves, and say, is this what I really want? I don't have the exact statistics on it, but I can imagine the amount of people who pivoted careers in the pandemic is so high because people finally started to realize, I want to live a life well spent. I want to live
yeah.
experience is well spent. And so it completely transitioned the way that we look at things. And now, you look at my generation in New York City, and the way that people who don't feel connected to their culture look at work is, okay, well, I'm doing this right now. They're all actively looking for other jobs at the same time as they're at their company. And that's not because their bosses are mean or bad. It's because they just don't feel connected to it.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
feel like they can lift right out, so they do. So they're constantly looking for the next opportunity for the higher payment, and
Yeah.
companies are are okay with like are not aware of that. And if they realize that if the people actually felt cared and valued, it would completely change their whole experience of their employee workforce, especially in major cities. They would save so much money.
So much money. So what is the solution? Tell us how do we take our team to that next level where they feel cared and valued? Like what is the intervention you bring them?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we have our core offering, which is called the SpotCorp session, and then we can talk later about learning journeys because obviously the initial offering breaks the ice and starts the process, but real change takes place over time. And so in our core offering, basically what happens is it's a three-act, customizable, entirely facilitator-led experience. And each act focuses on either a different need that is specific to your business or to a specific aspect of one larger need. And the first act is always going to be some sort of game, some sort of improv, something like that, but it's going to be tailored and focused to your needs. So, for instance, let's say you want to work on um, consolidating information. That's one of the things you want to work on. People are sending emails that are too long, meetings are going too long. Great. We're going to play a game with you called Timed Fairy Tales, where you have to give a fairy tale in 1 minute. Then you have to tell the same fairy tale in 30 seconds. And then you have to tell the same fairy tale in 15 seconds. You, in a really fun and engaging and potentially a little nerve-wracking way, are going to practice the skill, are going to have the feeling of what it feels like to remove superfluous information, and you're going to have fun doing it. And then we pair that with research that will feed into that learning. So either a statistic about how valuable it can be for their company if we want to help catalyze the change, a story of another company that made a transition that helped them make that transformation, or research activity, which is an activity which is done in a more formalized moment to actually let them have a tangible experience of what it would look like in the work that they're doing. And so then we move on to Act Two. Act Two, I say it's one prompt, one wheel, unlimited possibilities. So we give them a prompt, something lighter fare, something like what makes me laugh or what makes me smile. But again, entirely customized to fit the needs of the company that we're working with. And we give them up to a minute to answer the question. Relatively easy, but they have to spin a wheel of mediums. So it might land on rap, it might land on stand up, it might land on sock puppets. And whatever medium it lands on, that is how they have to express themselves. That is usually where we get the most nerves going. That's when we get like the, oh my gosh, and like I don't know if I can do this and all of that. And we say, don't worry, we're all doing it together. It's only a minute, and you're answering a question that you know how to answer. So we give them enough anchor points of accessibility and comfort with what is in front of them that they can hold on to while they're taking on this challenge. And at the same time, they're practicing overcoming that fear so that if they need to speak up in a meeting or give a presentation, they now know how to do that. And then we move on to the final section, which is the spotlight session. And this is where we get into like a real question. That's that storytelling we were talking about that storytelling that really helps people see each other in a new way. But because you're in an office, you need to slowly roll that out. If you just jump in with like, tell me your like deepest, fear. It's like, no, absolutely not. Also, that would not be a question we would ever do. But something of that ilk. Um, and so what we do with the spotlight question is we want to prompt that really gets them having to think. So, like, for instance, we've done programs on change management, and the question will be something like, what is one time I was resistant to change, but ultimately realized it was the best thing for me? So now what we're getting you to do is if you're dealing with a change in front of you and we ask you why you're struggling with change or why you won't change, or your walls go up, your haunches go up, you protect yourself. But if you get to celebrate a past win, if you get to celebrate a past discovery, you are getting the feeling of, oh, I remember the last time I was this nervous or this resistant, and then I got to the other side of it, and it was actually a good thing. Maybe I can bring down these walls. Then all your coworkers go and they share, and you learn from their experiences. And then we have master facilitation facilitating all of these communications and pulling universal messages from each story and giving them back to the team. And then we even have a section in that session that's all about validation, and everybody gets basically lit up. They get a 1 minute speech of how amazing they are that comes right before they give their share. So by the end of it, you're feeling lit up, you're feeling inspired, you're feeling like you have tangible research that you can go and use in your actual job, and you're feeling like you had fun, like you spent, like it was time well spent. And even though you were scared and nervous, you feel connected that you did this experience with each other. And that is the catalyzing moment where you start to see each other in a new light. It's all of those things in tandem that work together to create a truly profound experience.
Yeah. And you know what it does is it just humanizes people. It's you're having a human fun experience, and laughter brings people together.
Yeah.
I mean, when you have a good laugh with someone, when you go to dinner with somebody, when you go on a podcast with them and you sort of like share a conversation in a different kind of way, in a not a facts and figures kind of way, you create that connection. I always had a work bestie. I always had somebody. There was always somebody at work that I had. Are you ready to go to lunch? It was like that one person you go to lunch with all the time. And I think that if you don't have that person, there, it's hard. It's hard, like, and then the one girl that we had such a great relationship. And I knew that like when we left work, we were not going to be as close because it was just like proximity. It's proximity. And it's just like the more you like the people you work with, the more you get into like real life with them. You're experiencing life with your coworkers. You're experiencing life with your coworkers. And yeah, they're not part of your family, but you might see them more than your family. And I think you best be liking those people, or at least try to have a relationship with them.
100%. And when you know their stories, it makes it so much easier.
Yes, yes, because you understand. And then you could have like, hey, how's your kid doing? Would you go on vacation? How's your mom? How's this? How's that? What'd you eat today?
Mhm.
What what are you having for lunch today? Like I want to know what people are eating. I want to know like we had a really good cafeteria at one of my places. So it was always about food and friends and fun. And like, I guess you don't go to work is work, but I really believe that we can have fun at work.
Oh, 100%. That is definitely one of our missions. It's not the mission as far as the bottom line of CEOs and why people buy, but if you're talking to me about why I do what I do, we spend at least one third of our day, our lives at work. We should absolutely have fun at work. And that is
Yeah.
the mission of what we do.
Well, and it's good for your health, right? It's
Yeah.
really good for you to enjoy what you're doing because stress kills you. I kind of attributed to a lot of women that had very high stress jobs that weren't completely being authentic in their life.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean that makes a lot of sense. And I think that there was and still to some extent is like a level of like, oh, I need to put on a facade for my employees or for my coworkers. But when you have a truly psychologically safe space where everyone can kind of say how they're feeling, be supported, be lifted up, and not in a way that coddles, but in a way that says like, hey, if you're open with what you're feeling, we can give you clear understanding of
Yeah,
our expectations and we can come to an agreement and alignment on where we can be open and where we need to be more professional. You
right.
can create a truly transformed
I
workplace.
love that. I love that because the thing is, if you don't have that, it's just uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable. You're always kind of like looking behind you. Who's coming for me next? And there have been environments that I've worked in where it wasn't okay to be that authentic because if you showed your weakness, someone was coming for you. If you showed part of who you really were and where you were weak, there were people that would you know, take advantage of that because in one way they feel threatened by you and so they're going to come for your weaknesses. So if you shined or if you were the center of attention for any sort of reason, there was that sort of like dichotomy. And so it's complicated. Some of these workplaces are very complicated. I told the story to a therapist once, Jesse. This is so funny. So I told her, I said, listen, why am I struggling? I don't understand. She's like, Julie, you became a shiny object and you needed to be a gray rock. And so, in order to survive some of these like situations at work, you need to be a gray rock, not a shiny object. Stop being so shiny. And I'm like, oh, you mean I need to just go there and do what they tell me to do and not like put my innovation or my thought creativity into it? And she's like, yes, you needed to just do the minimum. And like that destroyed me. I'm like, oh my God, well, that's not a place I want to be, right? If I can't be Julie, and maybe there's aspects of me that are shiny. And I enjoyed the workplace because I had a challenge and I was going to do something innovative and new and different and I was going to contribute. That's why I was at work. I wasn't at work to be a gray rock. Were you, Jesse? I mean, does anyone set out to be a gray rock at work?
No, they don't. And I think what is so interesting about what you're saying is that, and I think this really comes down to leaders, and is one of the reasons we require leaders to be in all our sessions. So the leader of the team has to be in the session and participate. And what because let's say that you're coming up with all these innovations and they're great innovations, but your boss is just like, oh my gosh, like I I just want Julie to do her work because the time that it takes to talk to her about all these innovations is stressing me out. That is a valid concern, but what that narrative, if given to you, says is your innovations are not valuable, do not matter. And what's interesting is that your innovations are actually going to be the thing that's going to move the company from here to here. So I can give you a perfect example of this. I have an employee, my chief production officer, and there was a point where she was coming up with ideas like left and right. And I was like, oh my gosh, like she's so smart. These are such good ideas. I don't have time for them right now. I just don't. I'm busy. We're building a company. We're doing too many things. And at first, my first impulse was I'm just gonna tell her. I'm gonna be like, you know what? Let's focus on what we're working on right now. Thanks. And I realized that what that does and what that damages is that that directly destroys her innovation, her belief in the creativity that is ultimately going to help my business thrive. So, and I can't remember the exact name, but I basically called it the list of the big list of not yet. So I said,
I
when
love that.
anyone has an idea that they think is incredible, but we don't have time for right now, let's put it on the big
Yeah.
list of not yet. And as soon as we've got a little downtime, let's look at the list. Let's see what things we were excited about, and let's go back to it. Let's go back to the shiny objects. Let's go back to the things that are exciting us because your ideas are so valuable. And right now, can I get your sign off? Because we're all supporting the company together to do this. And it's not, but for now, this is what we're doing. It's for now, can we do this? Can we all agree that this is the best thing for the company?
Yeah. And I think that the it's a very nuanced thing. You need to move the business forward. You need to focus on one thing. And I think that leaders need to understand how to manage that, right? Without destroying the person or making them bad. So utilizing that energy and channeling it into something else while not completely throwing the idea away is helpful. But I think that everyone kind of goes into business to do something new and innovative, to be a part of something bigger than themselves, to contribute in a way that feels meaningful for them. Otherwise, why are you there? That's the thing, why you're there. Well, I think there's so many amazing things here, Jesse, that we've talked about today for team building. Like, let me just ask you one thing as we go today, and of course, I want to know how our audience can find out more about you. What do you think the number one thing you want to tell leaders today about developing their teams? What is the one piece of advice you would want to give them?
Okay. I have said this on other podcasts, but I'm gonna say it until my face goes blue. Acknowledgement is your best friend. It is your easiest tool for retaining your employees. So, and acknowledgement is much more nuanced than you think it is. Just saying, "Hey, great job, Sarah," is nice, but and it matters. Do that over doing nothing. But all that says is like, "Cool, my boss thinks I'm doing a good job." But if you say, "Hey, Sarah, I really liked, the way you worded that email. I think it's going to get what we need to the client in a really clear way, and you're doing a really great job." Boom. Okay. Two things just happened. One, I see you're actually looking at the work I'm doing and seeing the value of it, which makes me feel like I matter at this company, which makes me one, want to stay because I feel like I matter, but two, want to stay because I feel like you need me. You need me here to help you because my input and thoughts are so valuable. And number two is that when you acknowledge someone for work that they think is just kind of whatever, it puts a signal to them that this is important work. And so the next time that it comes up, they're going to do it the same way that they've been doing it. Whereas what often happens is that that doesn't get acknowledged. And then Sarah sends three more emails. She's nervous. She's not sure. So she sends three different styles. And then the boss comes and goes, "Sarah, I don't know what happened. Your first email was great, but these last three were just so not it. What happened?" And Sarah didn't even know the first one was great. So when you acknowledge a behavior that's working, it puts a signal in your employee's head to go, "Oh, this is what I should continue doing. This is what I should keep going with." So start with that little piece of acknowledgement and see where your teams grow.
I love it. I love it. Jesse, where can our audience find out more about what you're doing?
Absolutely. So, my name is Jesse Puddles, Jesse Puddles. You can find me on LinkedIn, or you can find more information about the company on LinkedIn at Spot Corp Events. On Instagram, same thing, Spot Corp Events. Spot Corp, all one word, just like in the logo behind my head. Um, and then events. And then again, spotcorpevents.com is where you can find more information.
Amazing. Jesse, thank you so much for being a guest on the Stay on Course podcast.
Of course, I hope that it was as interesting as we wanted it to be.
Yes, it was. Thank you so much.
Of course, I'm here anytime.